All right, guys, welcome aboard. Time once again for the Sunday night forum video chat. This is the October 4th, 2015 edition, and I hope that you find some interesting tidbits here. As usual, we'll have forum roundup, a little bit of Apple/Mac related news, and a few tips and tricks, etc., etc., etc. So hopefully you'll find something interesting this week. I hope we've also kind of upgraded the sound a little bit, made a few changes to the broadcast bunker, so hopefully that helps things out a little bit. I want to start the chat off by pointing out that we now have 281,335 members, the newest of which is, let me see if I can read my notes here, folks. Give me one sec. Mike DePaz. Sorry if I mispronounced that. My notes are a little shaky this evening. So, as usual, welcome to our newest member and all the members that joined this week. If you're just now catching our show for the first time, sometimes I have a second host with me, sometimes not. Looks like you're stuck with me for tonight, but that's okay. I'll try to make it worth your while and throw in a lot of good, useful information. In our forum roundup, and as usual, I'll put links to everything that we discussed tonight in the show notes. What I'll do is in the bottom of the notes on the Google page, I'll post one link that leads back to a forum thread. And in that forum thread, you'll see the links for tonight's information. And if you scroll backwards through the thread, you'll see the content for most of our other shows. There are some of the early ones where I did not put up show notes. Here recently, I've started doing that because and I posted them in the thread rather than posting them in two places, because as I was posting them in two places, errors were creeping in here, there, and everywhere. So we kind of post, and that gives you a good reason to check out the forum. A lot of good information there in the forum. Keep in mind that it doesn't cost you anything to be a member. You do need to be a member if you're going to ask a question, but obviously you can lurk and view threads, etc., without becoming a member. Certainly, we hope that you will choose to become a member, as we always like having new faces, and you never can tell when you won't know something that somebody else needs to know. So join us and join all the fun. Speaking of fun, Apple dropped El Capitan. It's officially out now. If you'll remember, I told you I was expecting it late September, perhaps by no later than mid-October. Turned out I was right. They dropped it before October 1st. Many of our members have already downloaded it. Some of them are waiting to see what happens. And some are experiencing some download issues. In part, it seems to be because of the speed of their connection, and part because of perhaps the fact that Apple's servers have been swamped. As usual, when there's a new OS, many people wanting to jump on things right away. A lot of people did. And member H-Rod Music reminds us that if for some reason you have a problem with the download not completing properly, that you can go to the Purchase tab in the Mac App Store, click on it, click on that download while holding down the Option key, and this allows you to cancel the update and re-download it. I want to thank him for that. I haven't had to use that option very much. Once or twice I've had the problem. Fortunately, I've had a fairly stable connection, and Our ISP has managed to provide decent speeds, sometimes slower than others. In the height of OS 10 downloads, things will sometimes slow down for me. But one of the advantages of it being released in October is that when it's released in the morning, I'm at work. And by the time I get home in the evening, the demand a lot of times will have slowed down a little bit, particularly if I download late at night. And the demand will have slowed down just enough that I'm able to maintain a good, solid connection. So if you experience connection issues or you otherwise have that download hang as it's downloading, that's a good way to remember that by going to the Purchase tab and clicking on the option clicking it, you have the option of stopping the download and reinitiating. Also, you need to keep in mind that if you're going to make a bootable installer, then that installer needs to be made before you run the installation process. As it has done in the past, the El Capitan installer deletes itself when the install is complete. However, one thing that seems to be different, I don't remember this with Yosemite or with previous versions of OS 10 downloads, is when you click on the download link and to initiate the download, you're asked if you want to install the file or save the file. If you have multiple Macs, then it's probably a good idea to download that file. And then that way you don't have to re-download it again. And you can always take that downloaded file and create a bootable USB installer. Some people are having a little bit of a problem with this, but for the most part it seems to work. I'll post a link to some of the options that are available for that. There are a couple of different procedures that you can use. As soon as I find a solid one, I know there's one piece of software that we've used in the past, the Disk Maker series. I think it's been updated to El Capitan, but I personally have not tried that yet. Anyway, we'll update that information to keep you going with that. Coming up in just a few minutes, I will have some El Capitan tips for you as far as using El Capitan. But right now, while we're talking about installation, let me point something out for those of you that have not downloaded yet. If you have not downloaded and installed El Capitan, before you do, go ahead and I prefer to do it via a bootable clone. Go ahead and make a clone of your existing installation. And the reason for that is that, excuse me, should you need to revert things backwards, in other words, should you need to back up to Yosemite or earlier, the easiest way to do that is with a clone of your existing installation. In other words, with every OS release, we've gotten at least a few posts on the forum that say this version of OS 10 is not working for me. How do I revert back to what I had? Well, how you revert depends in part on which version you were coming from. For example, with the Snow Leopard installations, you had the option of using a disk. Subsequent installations did not have a disk. They were download installs. And if you didn't download them at the time that they were released, those versions have been pulled from the App Store. So your best bet, assuming you did not create a bootable drive of the earlier installations, really your best bet as far as a backup procedure is before you start that download. I think there's several steps that you need to complete. One, before you begin downloading Yosemite, make a backup of your setup, uh, preferably a clone. There are several good applications out there that are able to clone earlier versions of the OS. You can also make the clone in disk utility. If you've never done this, post a question in the forum. Right now, the two pieces of software that seem to be forum favorites are SuperDuper and Carbon Copy Cloner. I suggest that you use cloning software, whether you do it with one of those two pieces of software or you do it from within disk utility. Make that clone before you start the installation. Step two, before you start the installation, would be to verify your drive. Go into disk utility, which is found in your utility folder, and launch disk first aid and verify your hard drive. I'm not really talking about the permissions verification here. I'm talking about verifying the drive. Let disk utility attempt to correct whatever errors it finds. Once that's done and you're pretty sure that you've got a stable drive, now go ahead and download that installer. Go through the steps to create a bootable USB drive and then go from there. Because now you've got a couple of pathways to back up, to get out of an error. Let's assume you don't like El Capitan or it doesn't work with some of your hardware. Then you can revert back easily by loading your clone. Also, before you update, it might be worth it. If you have some apps that are mission critical for you, go ahead and take a look, post a question in the forum, but also take a look at, there's a site called Warring Apps. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. I don't have it in there right now, but they're pretty good at keeping up with what's working, in El Capitan and what's not. That's also true for previous versions of the operating system. Right now, the El Capitan information may be a little spotty since it's only been out a few days, and sometimes it takes several days, several weeks before enough users have issues to start reporting problems. That does not by any means, we've had this discussion on the show before if you're a regular listener, that does not by any means imply that this version is any more or less unstable. It's simply a matter of until you get a certain number of people using it with different hardware configurations and sometimes you don't catch some of the things right away. That's one of the things that I like about the public beta process. Speaking of the beta, I ran the public betas from the day that you could get into it. I was overall fairly impressed with how quickly bugs were squashed as they became known. I reported a couple myself, and they were pretty quickly squashed. I know for a fact that some of our other members were running the beta. I did not encounter any huge problems. And later, when I give you the OS, the El Capitan hints that I have for today, I'll tell you which ones that I'm finding most useful. Most of them I've been using since the beta. All right, let's move on from that. As I say, I'll put links to that in the show notes. If you are a fan of the show, you know that Kirk McLaren, aka the iTunes guy, is a favorite of mine. He is sort of go-to guy when it comes to iTunes-related information. But the tip that he has this week is one that I like a lot, and you will like if you are an iTunes user and you miss the power user feature. There used to be a power search. We called it power search. Some of our members called it power search, but it really was a sort of an advanced search function. It helped to really drill down if you were drilling down into obscure entries and the like. And we sort of missed that. It seems to have disappeared. Kurt McLaren points out that you can use a search engine. He's I think in the tip used Google, but it should work with other search engines as well. You can use a web search engine to power search the iTunes content, iTunes Store content. That's possible because those content, you may have noticed sometimes when you click on a link, it leads you to a web page first, and then that page will say open in iTunes. Well, because of that, you can power search the iTunes Music Store using the web, using a web browser. I'll post a link to that, the specific steps. I've posted a link about confining search results to one site a while ago, but to be honest with you, I don't remember the steps right off the top of my head. So rather than try to go through the steps, I'll post a link to his discussion. I think you'll find his tip very helpful. In some other Apple-related news this week, iFixit, I think, is having their app pulled from the App Store. They have a little bit of a disagreement going on with Apple. They managed to get a hold to one of the demos of the new Apple TV, got a hold of one and did a teardown on it. And in the process, appear to have violated a non-disclosure agreement that Apple had with whomever they got the device from. As some of you who are longtime Apple fans know, Apple takes these non-disclosure agreements seriously. In the past, in the recent past, they've not been quite as tough about software disclosure violations, but they have been pretty tough on disclosures of hardware violations where someone violated a non-disclosure agreement. And I can kind of understand that in the sense that what you don't want to have happen if you're Apple or any manufacturer for that reason. Let's say you prototype a device and you've got someone testing it, and some group gets a hold of it and posts detailed info about the way it's constructed and the innards and all of that, and you have to make a change. But when you do, then people are kind of upset because the final device isn't how they expected it to be in some way, shape, or form. So they take those non-disclosure agreements very seriously, and I have a link to that article from iFixit with describing the problem that iFixit had. Another one coming up, I saw this the other day. I've been kind of wondering if this was coming. When I bought my current Apple TV, I have one of the current devices. When I bought that one, I was wondering how long it was going to be before Amazon was going to have a conflict with some of the devices that are being sold on their website. As you know, Amazon has a streaming media device, and so does Google, Roku, and the like. Apple TV, which you can get through some Amazon vendors. So certainly, I started to wonder how that was going to be, how that was going to be handled. Well, apparently, what's happening is Amazon apparently sent an email to some of its marketplace sellers saying that they will stop selling the Apple TV and Google's Chromecast device, since those devices don't, quote unquote, interact well with Amazon's Prime Video feature. No new listings for these two products will be allowed, and posting of existing inventory will be removed as of October 29th. Amazon said Prime Video doesn't run easily on its rival hardware. Roku's set-top box, Microsoft's Xbox, Sony's PlayStation do work with Amazon's video service aren't affected. Amazon's Fire TV stick, which plugs into an HDMI port, and streaming devices such as Netflix, Prime Video, will continue to work. So the problem here is essentially that, according to them, Google Chromecast and Apple's Apple TV do not work well with Prime Video. That's true to a certain extent, at least in the case of Apple TV. There isn't a Prime Video app at the moment that runs on the Apple TV. You can, however, and this is sort of a workaround, install the Prime Video app on your iPad or iPhone, and then use AirPlay to send the video to your Apple TV. That works reasonably well. I've done it a few times, and it seems to work reasonably well. But we'll see how this works out. This may cost some of the Amazon vendors some business, in the sense that I was looking at some of the Apple TV features for the new device, and it would not surprise me if a lot of people pick up one of the newer devices to keep their, they may keep their existing Apple TV device, but it wouldn't surprise me if a lot of users see enough new features to pick up a new device. And if they can't get it from a vendor on Amazon, they're going to go elsewhere. So we'll see how that shakes out. I do have the link for building an iTunes, an El Capitan flash drive. That's in the show notes. So let's get down to some of the El Capitan tips. As I said, I have been using the El Capitan since the betas were first announced. And it's been pretty stable for me. I haven't had any stability issues. We did have some bug fix issues, and there was a little bit of time there where I seem to have had an issue with mail junk filtering not working as it should. That was in one of the intermediate betas. It worked in the first beta, didn't work as well in the subsequent one, but when the last beta was released, it was back to functioning well. That's one of the downsides of beta software. I don't know for certain that it was a problem with the beta. What I do know is my junk mail filtering is now working as it did before, which is good. I was going to have to start screaming if it didn't. Some of the things, I'm looking at a website called C10, and they have a series of El Capitan tips to help you get the most out of El Capitan. They've got 8. There are some other sites with this one. I linked to this one because it is one of the sites that doesn't load a lot of auto-playing video and the like. Oh, and speaking of which, I meant to mention earlier, I'm going to put a link to this in the show notes because it's turned an interesting discussion. I mentioned a couple weeks ago that there was an iOS developer that pulled down a pop-up blocker that they had developed. because they didn't like the idea of blocking all ads, because websites are to some extent dependent on ad revenue. Well, this has sparked a discussion. The folks at AdBlocker Plus now have a way for you to opt into approved ads, and that's spawned some discussion in the forum about the merits of ad blocking. I've talked about this a little bit on the show before. While I recognize the need for ad revenue from a site, for a site to develop ad revenue and monetize their traffic, there are some things I don't like. One of them is when you have so many of these ads and Facebook buttons and YouTube buttons and all of these that you can't read the content for the buttons. You've got video that auto plays whether you want it or not. You've got to go in and stop it either by using a plug-in or manually stopping it. This can be a significant drain on bandwidth. Last week, I linked to an article from Kurt McLaren talking about how much that affected his connection to certain sites in terms of both the amount of data that was being loaded and the time that it takes to load that data. That can be a significant drain for some people. There's an interesting discussion of that in the forum, and the extent to which how much users are willing to be aggressive in blocking ads and ads, trackers, etc. And rather than rehash that, I'll put a reference to the thread in there. Pay particular attention to the post by Van Smith. He has pretty much summarized my view on the thing. I hate it when I channel Van, but he has pretty much summarized my view on the thing. So I won't rehash that. Just go in and take a look at all the posts. It's a very well thought out, very good discussion on both sides. But I think Van Smith has addressed my concerns in ways that I understand better than I could at the moment. All right, so let's move on to some of the tips for El Capitan. What I've done with the show notes in the section where I talk about El Capitan tips, I've linked to the slideshow that has 8 tips. And then I've linked to individual slides that are going to the tips that I have found most useful. There's a setting now within El Capitan to auto hide the menu bar if you don't want it. But yet, to get it back, all you have to do is scroll up to the top area of the screen. So that's one I don't use a whole lot. I find the menu bar helpful to me, and it's not much of a distraction, really. One that I do use is split view. Split view is similar to the same function in Windows, where you can have 2 app windows visible at the same time. Right now, I've got a dual monitor. I've got a monitor set up, external monitor, which is set to the Google page in case somebody posts a question there. And in that window, I can also click on some of the web pages that are links to the stories we're talking about. On the other page, I've put up a split view, which has my view of the Google chat program and also the show notes. I put those on my MacBook Pro and put the windows in split view. I am using split view more and more as I remember the key sequence. Rather than go into all of that now, I will, as I say, I've linked to that because that's one of the tips that I use a lot. Another one that I did not know, and I had not used this feature in the beta, You can now delete files immediately. As you know, for a long time, if you were on a network drive, you could click a file and then do Command Delete, and that would move a file off that network volume immediately. Well, now, if you use the Command Option and Delete key sequence after you select a file, you can basically delete the file immediately. Make sure that it's one you want to go to send away, though. I mean, don't use this as a sledgehammer for a file. There's some other ways to do it. There's a link to that in the slide. Here's another one that I really like. I started using this almost immediately upon downloading the beta, and that is pinning the website in Safari. I used to have a script running as one of my login items that opened Mac Forum, Mac OSG, which was the Macintosh Operating System User Group, which is now defunct, and a couple of other websites. I had about 4 sites that opened as soon as I opened Safari. Well, with the changes in Apple made where Safari now will open whatever you left off, I don't need to run that script anymore. But sometimes I want to get rid of some of the clutter in that bar with all those windows. So what I've done is I've got 3 or 4 sites pinned in Safari. They appear in the tab bar in the upper left, just to the left of the tabs, and they look like almost like little buttons. And if you click on one of them, it opens that button, that website. These sites are updating in the background, so to speak, so they're always up to date when they open up. I have one of them pinned to the Mac Forums new post page, so I can get back to that quickly, which is really helpful when you're moderating posts or tracking issues and want to see if we've gotten a response from the user. I've got Kirk's website, his iTunes site, and 1 or 2 other things pinned. Pinning a site is really simple. You are going to basically open the site that you want to pin, then you right-click in that tab bar, and one of your options will be pin this site. If you ever need to unpin it, you do the same thing. You click on the button that you want to unpin, and you click unpin this site. And if you don't remember what buttons you've pinned there, if you scroll over them, you'll see a description. Kind of like tooltips used to do in the old days. Kind of like the graphic for some web pages do. Okay? Another one that I have not used a lot in the beta. To be honest with you, this one slipped past me. I looked at this earlier today as I was looking at their tips. I had not noticed this in the beta. It's the ability to silence tabs. As some of you know, one of the reasons you're running ad blockers is in some sites preload video content, preload audio that starts playing whether you want it to or not. And so one solution for this is to be able to mute all tabs in Safari. Suppose you have some tabs open in Safari and you notice that some of them are playing stuff. There's a bunch of information, a bunch of stuff starts playing in the background, video, audio, whatever. And now you could cycle through the bunch of tabs that you have open and see which one's causing the problem, but that takes a while. Here's one that you can do that speeds things up. And first thing you do is open a new tab that's not playing any sound. And then you click on the Mute All Tabs button in the URL address bar. All the open tabs in Safari will be muted. If you want to undo this, you click on that same space again, and it will bring back the sound. But this is a quick way to quiet a bunch of tabs should you need to. One of the other ones that I use a lot, and those of you that have large monitors, the 27-inch IMAX, for example, and larger, or those of you that use multiple monitors may find this helpful. I find myself at a multiple monitor setup. Under older OSs, I sometimes lose track of where the cursor is. Okay? One thing that you can do real quickly in El Capitan, you could not do in Yosemite. It might have been possible with some third-party software, but you couldn't do it out of the box. And that is, to be able to find the cursor quickly, here's what you do. If you're using a mouse, take your mouse and shake it side to side as you're, let's say you're moving your hand from left to right as if you're going to move across the screen. Just make a couple of quick motions. As you do, the cursor gets larger and larger until you can easily see it. If you're using a trackpad, such as the Magic Trackpad, you can do the same thing. But instead of shaking, obviously what you're going to do is you're going to take one finger and just drag back and forth across the trackpad. And as you do that, and do that very quickly, it will, don't click on anything, just move side to side. It will enlarge that cursor and make it much easier to find. I find that I use that a lot, particularly when I first wake up the cursor, the screen, and I need to find the cursor, or if I've been moving things around a little bit to see what's going on, and I lose the cursor. That is a tremendous, that's a small touch in El Capitan, but it's one of the nicer features in my mind. It's cut way, way down on the number of times that I lose track of the cursor. So that's going to just about do it for the El Capitan tips. That's also going to just about do it for this week's show. I hope that you've enjoyed all the information. I've got a couple other things I need to take care of before work tomorrow. And besides, there's a Saints and Cowboys game on NBC at the moment, which I'm missing. So I'm going to check that out. That was the only game I was really interested in today. So hopefully that turns out well. At this point, I don't know who I'm going to pull for. I grew up watching both the Saints and the Cowboys, so I always hate this game when it comes around on the schedule. But that's going to do it for this week. I'll have the show notes up in a few minutes, complete with that couple of extra links that I mentioned to you. And until next week, this is your host, Sylvester Rock, a.k.a. Sly Dude on the forum. Keep an eye out for me in the forum. Come on in if you haven't already joined. Do so. Ask lots of questions. Be sure to check out our community rules. They're pretty lax, but we do have a few things we keep out for. And go ahead and ask any questions that you might need some help with. Until next time, I hope that you've enjoyed this week's show. We'll see you next Sunday night on the Mac Forum Sunday Chat.